every single ICE agent who's engaged in this aggressive overreach and are trying to hide their identities from the American people will be unsuccessful in doing that. And every single one of them, no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, will of course be identified.
Several suspects are now in custody after a Texas police officer was shot in the neck while responding to a call outside of an ICE facility. So it happened in Alvarado, which is near Fort Worth. This was over the holiday weekend, and Jonathan Hunt is following this story for us. Hi, Jonathan.
Good morning, Dana. This all played out in the late evening of July 4th outside the Prairieland Detention Center in Alvarado. Police officers responded to a call about a suspicious person outside the center. When they arrived, they saw someone who appeared to have a gun. One of the Alvarado officers tried to talk to that person, and at that point, several other people opened fire on the officer, who was hit in the neck. He was treated at a local hospital and has since been released. Officers arrested a number of people at the scene.
So I'd like to address today the situation you saw over the weekend in Texas and even many other states on top of that, where the increasing trend of left-wing violent rhetoric as well as actual political violence, of course, happening in the streets of America has unfortunately and tragically and horrifically, as we all warned would happen if Democrat Party leadership and media did not tone down their rhetoric in regards to ICE officials and the Trump agenda of deportations. Well, it is unfortunately seemingly here. This is a developing situation, let's be clear, and so we're still trying to figure out the exact motive, but local law enforcement is already corroborating this very likely cause and effect situation where Border Patrol officials seemingly here were targeted by an assassination attempt in response, it would appear here again, very likely to the left-wing outrage over the Trump agenda of deportations. Now, in response to this, we are hearing very little word from the Democrat Party, whether they're even going to acknowledge that this happened or condemn this. Of course, we know that they spent weeks upon weeks here making excuse for the political violence that you saw in the streets of Los Angeles and many other cities. They tried to scapegoat ICE agents here as being the problem. They, of course, attacked the Trump administration for taking very common sense moves like allowing the ICE people to wear masks, considering that there have been repeated doxing attempts and threats against these very officials. And this is apparently all went down in McAllen, Texas, as an armed assassin, basically, it would appear here, tried to take out Border Patrol officials. Now, luckily, and thank God for this, no lives at the current moment were lost. There is indeed one injury. It was not happening to a Border Patrol official, but still, nonetheless, in response to all of this, the greater conversation over left-wing rhetoric against deportations is being examined. A lot of people are making points about that, including none other than border czar Tom Homan. And so we'll get into this with all of the details in this video. As usual, folks, though, if you enjoy our content, if you want to support our work, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We're almost here at close to 500,000 subs. I would appreciate very much your support. That ensures that we can keep bringing out the truth to more and more viewers. And with that said, here are the details according to Fox News. So an active shooter who was armed with tactical gear and obviously a firearm opened fire upon Border Patrol agents as they arrived at a Border Patrol annex facility in McAllen, Texas in the Rio Grande Valley on Monday, according to local law enforcement sources. Now, agents and local police returned fire and neutralized the gunman in the situation. According to the reporting here, no federal agents were hit, luckily, but one McAllen police officer was struck. Law enforcement sources are saying that this officer is in stable condition, and so obviously our prayers are up. Hopefully, everything there ends up being fine, and we're thankful, obviously, he's alive and stable. But here is the quote saying that this morning, an individual opened fire at the entrance of the U.S. Border Patrol sector annex in McAllen, Texas. Both Border Patrol agents and local police helped to neutralize the shooter, the Department of Homeland Security said in a statement to Fox News. This is an ongoing investigation being led by the FBI. More information will be shared as it becomes available. And again, obviously, this is a developing situation. And so, we're not going to immediately rush to, pin down exactly what happened here, or exactly why it happened, because, obviously you want to leave some room for that investigation to take place. But it is worth noting here that already law enforcement has come out And they stated here that they believe this attack was a purposeful ambush targeting Border Patrol officials. Local police say they will be holding a news conference about this attack later on Monday. And so, there's a number of possibilities that perhaps you could see. Perhaps it was politically motivated. Perhaps it was even maybe gang-related, cartel, whatever. But the point there already kind of rings to be the same exact thing, which is, yes, these officers are in a highly dangerous line of work while they work to secure our borders and enforce the laws of our country in a quite righteous sense. And the constant demonization and attack of them certainly is not helping all that much, to say the least. Nonetheless, this is far from, by the way, the only acts of anti-ICE violence you saw on the Independence Day weekend, because, of course, Fox News here is further noting that you saw similar situations in Portland, Oregon, and other areas where, again, this party refuses to rein in their crazy radicals, and there probably is a very explicit reason for that, which is quasi by some form. They're basically the militant opposition there, right? And as you saw similarly back in 2020, they're essentially kind of encouraging or quietly egging on exactly what is happening here.
A number of people at the scene. A motive for the attack is still being investigated, but the Department of Homeland Security said a group of more than a dozen people had slashed tires of federal vehicles and damaged security cameras at the ICE facility. There was also another attack on an ICE facility in Portland, Oregon, Friday night, a facility that has been the site of an ongoing protest for several weeks. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche wrote on X Saturday morning, quote, "We are closely monitoring the attacks on DHS detention facilities in Prairieland, Texas and Portland, Oregon, and are coordinating with the USAOs and our law enforcement partners. The department has zero tolerance for assaults on federal officers or property and will bring the full weight of the law against those responsible." Now, both attacks, Dana, happened on the day President Trump signed his domestic policy bill into law, a bill, of course, that includes some $45 billion to expand the capacity of immigration detention centers and $31 billion for ICE operations. Dana?
Now, again, while we're still gathering these specific details, and I'm not inherently already going to immediately say that, oh, it's because of this or that, I think what is objectively true and undeniable fact, regardless of why the guy did it, is that the ruthless demonization of ICE officers, of Border Patrol agents, of the wider immigration agenda is certainly not helping or not all that constructive. Of course, people would immediately cite the way in which, for instance, as one example here, considering her city has become the poster child of left-wing violence against ICE, against federal officials, that the recent words of LA Mayor Karen Bass basically blaming ICE for the situation, saying that, oh, you want the violence to stop, you want the protests to stop, then stop the ICE raids because, you guys are really the bad guys. Yeah, certainly not sure if that's super constructive to the situation, is it?
But the real solution of all of this is for the administration to stop the raids. We have heard that these raids might take place for the next 30 days. We don't know how many are going to take place in a given day. And you just think about the disruption to families and the disruption to our local economy.
But of course, it's worth noting here that the Democrats have not just engaged in anti-ICE or anti-deportation activism. They have explicitly pushed and even sued and tried to lobby. There's currently laws right now in the California state legislature to actively take steps that would put ICE and Border Patrol and immigration officials in even more increased danger than they already are. Of course, this is a issue, right? The threats against them, the danger that they're in, that the Democrats have long tried to deny. They basically said it's an excuse, it's non-existent. And now, as you see, not just riots against the streets, not just them trying to storm in, break into, use Molotov cocktails, etc., against federal facilities. Now you even see a situation like this. I think it makes a pretty strong argument, right, that yes, we ought to take increased security measures to ensure that the lives of these federal officers are safe. But that is, of course, not what the Democrat Party has spent several weeks now trying to do, because let's not forget, it was not just a matter of, oh, Karen Bass doesn't like ICE or doesn't like the raids as a form of political speech. Gavin Newsom in the state of California, may remember, notoriously tried to sue and block the Trump administration using the National Guard, Marines, and U.S. military in order to not just bring order to the city of Los Angeles, but let's not forget here, right? The primary motive, the primary reason they were there was to protect federal buildings, particularly the DHS offices and detention centers where ICE agents were, where they were, harboring, they were, detaining, etc., illegal migrants. And the very reason this was so necessary is not only because there were violent people in the streets, literally, trying to do what they were trying to do, but on top of that, because LAPD was completely dropping the ball in protecting and ensuring the safety of these very federal officers. And so in response to all of that, right, what do the Democrats try to do? Do they stand down? Do they say, oh, the threat seems to be reasonable and justified, and so we're not going to make a big stink over National Guard protecting DHS? No, they did the opposite. They actively tried to get those troops away. Why? Because they wanted to put ICE agents in more active danger. Okay, that is an undeniable fact here. And again, when you look at now what's currently happening over the weekend, the threat that was being responded here was completely justified. And we all know that's the case because we've seen rampant rhetoric, even violent threats against ICE agents taking place in, recent months.
Yeah, no, look, she said the police could have handled it here. She's right. If you had a police force that was allowed to do its job, that isn't a woke police force that has its hands tied behind its back and allows criminals to commit criminal acts, they could do it, but they choose not to. Karen Bass and the city council members in Los Angeles allow criminals to commit criminals acts, and they let them get away with it. So, yeah, you wouldn't have to have President Trump bringing the National Guard in if you just did your job. But the point is, they don't want them to be able to do their job. Karen Bass wants ICE gone. She wants it just as bad as everybody else that's out here.
I'm just saying, right? Regardless of the motive, by the way. Again, leaving room for the idea, maybe it wasn't like a left-wing, terrorist, maybe it was just an instance of a violent person or gang-related or something. I still say it doesn't make a difference. The objective point is what? Immigration officials are in danger. They're largely in increased danger because of recent rhetoric, and it should be a pretty common sense, sensible position to say they ought to be protected, and if they need more resources, including National Guard, etc., to ensure that people's lives here are safe, including, by the way, the very migrants who are being detained themselves, because when there's things going on, everyone could potentially, end up in a bad situation there, then that should be a pretty easy position to defend, but of course it is not. And of course now, I want to also cite a recent controversy that has also ensued here, which is the very idea of the ICE officers wearing masks. Of course, Democrats have basically been labeling this as the secret police, the Gestapo. They shouldn't even be allowed to cover their faces. Even California State Senator Weiner, and that is indeed his name, Weiner, Representative Weiner there, has tried to file a law that would ban all law enforcement from ever covering their face for any reason. Though I'd like to also bring up to you guys that the Trump administration has been clear time and time again. The reason they're doing this is because of very real, incredible doxing attempts and threats against ICE agents. And again, when you look at the fact that, okay, it's translating into real stuff, I have to say the Democrat stance on this is clearly intended to put these people in more and more danger and potentially even their families as well. And it is truly disgusting, horrific, and condemnable.
My officers and agents are enforcing immigration law. They are not secret police. They are not. But people hiding behind keyboards are demonizing them. They're doxing them, stirring up anti-ICE sentiment, and putting their lives and their family lives at risk.
Because you guys are all about territory, and this is 18th Street, and this is Torrance, and you guys tag everything up, claiming hood. And now that your hood's being invaded by the biggest gang there ain't a peep out of you.
Wouldn't you wear a mask if it kept your family safe? If it kept your kids safe? We ran an operation with the Secret Service. We arrested someone that was going online, taking their photos, posting their families, their kids' Instagram, their kids' Facebooks, and targeting them. So let me ask, is that the issue here, that we're just upset about the masks? Or is anyone upset with the fact that ICE officers' families were labeled terrorists?
But I'm sure the excuse here will be, oh, that's not true, that's not happening. But it did. It just did. And you hear total political silence from one side of the aisle. Again, wonder why that might be. Now, with all of that in mind, today, Border Czar Tom Homan did an interview where he responded to the recent act. And, absolutely here, saying here, not, by the way, it's not just one random isolated freak accident or case of something happening, right? Because according to him, as he points out here, the attacks on ICE are up nearly now 700%. So you can say, even if this guy, maybe he wasn't actually doing it for left-wing purposes, okay, but it's undeniable that all the stuff you've seen in the streets and them trying to storm into DHS, that's political. No one denies that. We're talking about 500% a couple weeks ago, so it continues. He goes on here to state that the rhetoric against the men and women of ICE is skyrocketing, especially by members of Congress, and it must stop. Take a listen here to Homan.
Who were these suspects who were fired, who actually fired the shots and were later arrested? Who were they, Tom?
Look, they're your typical protesters that go from protesters to criminals. The attack on ICE officers, you've covered it many times, is up nearly 700% now. We were talking 500% a couple weeks ago, so it continues. The rhetoric against the men and women of ICE is skyrocketing, especially by members of Congress. We have senators, we have Congress people that compare ICE to the Nazis, compare ICE to racists, and it just continues. So the public thinks, well, if a member of Congress can attack ICE, why can't we? So the rhetoric has to stop, or it's a matter of time for someone to, one of the ICE officers goes down or a criminal goes down. But we already see an officer go down.
To be clear, so these were American citizens? These weren't illegals who opened fire?
No. As far as the investigation, I want to get ahead of the local investigation on this, but they appear to be agitators, people that are protesting ICE operations, damaging ICE property, want to attack ICE officers.
Well, the simple question I have for the detractors in response to all of this is, now do you understand? Now do you understand why it was necessary for ICE to cover their faces? Now do you understand why it was necessary to send the National Guard to protect DHS as rioters were constantly trying to cause problems in Los Angeles and even other cities on top of that? Now do you understand, by the way, why Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill creates such insane and large amounts of funding for border and immigration enforcement? Why? Because this is a serious problem in our country. It, as you can see by the vitriolic response here, is something that obviously needs to be addressed, both on the issue of public safety as well as the ability of ICE to really have the resources to do their job, considering you have so many different bad actors and agitators, whether that's illegal aliens or left-wing activists, trying to get in the way of that, right? Trying to prevent them from doing their job. And that is precisely why all of this stuff is so necessary and so important, as we so often talk about. But with that said, ladies and gentlemen, again, our prayers here are with the safety of all Border Patrol and immigration officials across this country. And with that said, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.